Well, as you can see, this is Miss Terika McCall. Miss Terika McCall earned her first PhD in health informatics from California. Dr. Terika McCall previously earned a Master's of Business Administration from Wake Forest University and a Master's in Public Health from the University of Michigan. Dr. McCall is currently a postdoctoral fellow at Yale University, CT.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much. So once again, thank you for having me today. And so just a little bit about my work and what I'm doing now that I've transitioned to postdoc. So when I did my dissertation at University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, I focused on looking at the acceptability of using telemental health options to deliver mental health services to Black women. So I basically had a 3-part study, and the first part of the study was a survey that basically gauged their attitudes and perceptions towards using things like text messaging, voice call, video call, and mobile app to receive services and also resources for mental health care. And so what I found is that and actually this survey, almost 400 Black women took this survey. So we had a sample size of 395 women that took the survey. And we found that the most popular modalities were voice call and video call. And that was primarily due to wanting to feel a connection to the counselor. So they felt that, text messaging and mobile apps could be a little impersonal. And also with text messaging, if you have to wait for a response, it kind of can increase your anxiety, which is an interesting finding that I didn't, even think about, the fact that having to wait if you're having a back and forth conversation could increase your anxiety. So the most popular modalities were really video call and voice call, because you could hear the counselor's voice, you could see them. So that was an interesting finding that we found with the survey. And also within the survey, we asked about, past mental health service use, and found that even though many of the women felt that within the past 12 months, that they felt there was a need for mental health service at some point within the past 12 months, majority of them did not go and seek care. So also I asked about what are the barriers to using mental health services. And a lot of it had to do around cost, not knowing where to go to seek treatment, having a hard time finding someone that looks like them. They wanted a Black woman. And so they said, okay, well, it's hard to find first a Black woman therapist. And then if I find her, sometimes she doesn't accept insurance. So then that's a barrier also. If they don't accept insurance, and it's only, they have to pay out of pocket. So then they're less likely to use that person. And so those were a few of the interesting findings from that study. So the second half of the dissertation study, I actually had focus groups at the county library and then also on campus. So we had 4 focus groups, and there were 5 women in each focus group. And within the focus group, we once again kind of took a deeper dive into like, what are, well, first, what is your perception of, how do you define like good mental health? How do you define bad mental health? Also, past service, mental health service use, like what are some of the issues? What are some of the barriers to it? What are the things that you use to cope instead of going to seek professional care? And then the last half, so that's what we focused on as far as questions in the first half of the focus group. So for the second half of the focus group, we focused on if you could develop an app that was tailored for Black women to help them manage anxiety and depression, what content and what features would you want in the app? And so within that work, we talked about mostly educational things. So they said they wanted to learn, how do I cope with different things that are like specific for Black women? How do I deal with, microaggressions in the workplace, right? So they said, we talked about apps that were on the marketplace, and while they cover things in general, they don't really address things that are specific for Black women. So they were like, how do I deal with microaggressions? How do I deal with, sexism? And, how do I deal with imposter syndrome? That was another thing that they mentioned. So they were saying, can we put content into the app that not only focus on, how to deal with anxiety and depression in general, but some topics that are specific for what Black women have to deal with. And then also they talked about wanting to feel a sense of community within the app, right? Having the option to have chat rooms where sometimes I don't really need to connect with a professional. I just want to talk to someone and vent about the day that I'm having. And, just having that community where someone can say, you know what, I went through the same thing, and, I totally understand, and this is what I did. So there was a lot of talk about self-management of anxiety and depression, and just having community to, outside of professional help, having someone to talk to and to relate to. And so those are some of the features that they mentioned. Also, some of the things that we talked about were like self-help and self-care features. So being able to have an accountability feature where they can go into the app. And so these are things that are built into the app already, is the self-care and the educational component. However, some of the things we're still trying to tailor the app and include those. So there's not any modules on like how to deal with microaggressions or anything yet, but those are things that are planned for the future. But right now there's like the self-care feature where you can put in, you can say for this next week, these are the things I want to do for self-care. And then once you hit that end date, the app will notify you and say, hey, how did you do? Did you get a chance to do X, Y, and Z? And then you can actually go in and say, okay, yeah, I was able to do this. I was able to get a pedicure. I was able to do whatever, or you weren't able to. And then it has some type of, depending on your response, it gives either like a congratulatory message, or, something that's just kind of like a motivational thing to say, it's okay, today's a new day, you can make a new plan, that type of thing. So within the app right now is mainly information about, anxiety and depression, also how to connect with a therapist. So they talked about how it was difficult to find Black women therapists. And so I included links to things like Therapy for Black Girls. So I don't know, you guys probably heard of Therapy for Black Girls, but they have a really good therapist directory. Also, their podcast is awesome. So there's links to podcasts that, focused on, Black women's issues, like Therapy for Black Girls. I think there's one that's Affirm, Balanced Black Girl. So all of these are included in the app, and also include things like financial assistance, like how do I find help for, rental assistance? How do I find help for, if I need insurance, things of that nature, financial aid. So trying to think of it kind of holistically, because we know that, these stressors, financial stressors, affect our mental health. And so those are some of the things that are included in the app. So basically, we have a prototype of an app that we then did some usability testing on, which was the third part of my dissertation. And so I had 15 women come into the biobehavioral lab there at UNC, and they actually put on eye tracking glasses so that we can measure, where they were looking, how long they were looking there. And they went through, it's called, basically they did cognitive walkthrough think aloud sessions, where they basically had these personas they were given and asked to complete tasks in the app. So what we were trying to do is basically make sure that the app is intuitive, right? So we could have the content and features in there, but if it's like hard to find, or, they can't navigate the app because, some things that we thought, like labeling the information section info, they actually thought it was info about the app and not information about anxiety and depression. So then we relabeled that. And so those are the type of things you find out in usability testing. Like for us, it was intuitive, like, oh yeah, info is supposed to be info about anxiety and depression. But then when we found that the women were saying, oh, we thought that actually we would look for resources, look in resource for that, then we had to make some adjustments. So the last part of my dissertation focused on that. And right now we have a paper under review with the results of that. So overall, the usability testing went well. And now we're in the second phase of development, where we're going in and taking the feedback from the focus group and usability testing and improving the app. And then also trying to seek funding to include some features like the more expensive features to build out, like the chat rooms. So that's going to take funding. So right now, that's the phase that I'm in, is that we have the prototype, we're continuing to develop and also look for funding so that we can include some more of the features that they want. And so I'm going to take a pause right quick just to get some water and also to take some questions. If you have any questions on anything that I've said so far.
I just had one question in regards to like your target group for the app. I noticed you were mainly speaking of Black women. So is the app targeted to Black women or just Black people in general?
Black women. Yes. So the reason why I decided to focus on Black women, well, first, just personally, dealing with anxiety and depression myself, I was like, man, there's really not anything out here that's tailored for us. And then I had friends and family members in the past 5 years that have gone through things, and I've been thinking like, okay, well, if you don't want to go in to see someone, what if you could do some, you had some type of tool that you could use in the comfort of your home that could help you in some way. So just personally, through personal experience and, seeing with my friends and family, the need for it. And then after that, so this is kind of like my thought process and coming up with my questions for my dissertation. And then I actually looked at the stats and saw that as far as the rates of mental illness, Black women's rates of mental illness are comparable to the general population, but they underutilize mental health services at less than half the rate of their white counterparts. So there's a need, but they're not actually going to seek services. So it's like, how do we make services more accessible and also destigmatize the use of mental health services and resources? And so that's part of the reason why I focused on Black women, because I feel like once you kind of get Black women on board, then you can get the whole community to come along, right? So I know in my household, my mom made all of our appointments. And if she said, hey, you need to go do this, you need to go do that, she was kind of the driving force, right? And so I feel like in focusing on Black women, we also focus on the entire community.
Right. Black women are like the foundation of the community. Not everybody see it, but we are.
Right. Good question.
What would be the signing up for the app? Is it just like you could download it, or you have to go through a certain process to sign up?
No, so the ideal is to actually have it launched in Google Play and in the App Store, and it'll be free for users. Like, I don't want there to be any barriers to use because, I want it to be like, you can just use it anytime. You don't have to pay for, to use upgraded features and all of that. So yeah, so as soon as it is launched, it'll be available and people can just download it from the App Store and use.
I'm curious about the demographic makeup of your focus groups. I have a private practice, and because of COVID, it's all online. And 99% of my clientele are Black women. And one of the things that I've noticed are the results that you literally just talked about. Women talking about, access to care because they couldn't find a therapist who looked like them, concerns about insurance, which is something I've been myself wrestling with, is this idea of accepting insurance, not because I have an issue with accepting insurance so much as I have an issue with the barriers on the other side of that and getting payments from the insurance company and not wanting to go through that. But I also recognize that I'm turning away a lot of Black women who don't have the financial resources to get therapy, and they also have insurance. So it's creating a significant dilemma for me. But I'm curious about the makeup of your focus groups. Professional Black women, certain socioeconomic status. Can you tell me about the makeup of that?
Yeah, so I can tell you, so as far as the demographic information that we captured, so the age range was from 21 to 79 years old, with a mean age of about 36.6. So it actually was, I would say the makeup, most were under 50 years old, right? And then we had, out of the 20 women, we had about, I think it was 4 women that were over the age of 50. So it was mostly younger women that were saying, and then you also find that they had insurance, like you were saying, but if you don't accept insurance and they're expected to pay, $100, $150 out of pocket, it's kind of like, well, I guess I have to go somewhere else, even though I would prefer to go to you. Right. So it's that financial barrier.
Right. Which I would say is probably the biggest barrier that I've encountered in that. So this was very validating for me in hearing your results.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm not sure how it is on your side, if there's any service that does that for you, that processes your insurance for you, or if that's something that you have to do, because I can imagine that'd be a huge strain if you have to go through that process and do it all yourself to get paid. Yeah.
It is. And another thing that I was concerned about also is that within the healthcare industry, there is a lot of stigmatizing and pathologizing of Black women in mental health. And so part of me wrestled with, am I contributing to that by buying into sort of like, you have to have insurance in order to be seen? So, and Bria's familiar with this. She and I have had a number of conversations about me sort of wrestling with that dilemma. But I've been tracking, I have noticed that more and more Black women are seeking care. And the biggest barrier has been the financial piece of it. Because it's like, okay, great. I found a therapist. She's Black. She understands my concerns. And I even offer sliding scale, because I recognize financial concerns that exist, but it's like, darn it, you don't accept insurance though. So because you don't accept insurance, I can't see you. And so it becomes a significant letdown for them, to the point where some I'm seeing some clients for free because of that very issue. So.
Yeah. And to your point, when you were talking about, it becoming, I guess, more acceptable for, Black women to go and seek mental health care, I feel like a lot of that is driven, one, by the media and seeing representation in the media, where I think I was watching Insecure, and I don't know if y'all are familiar with the show, and Molly was going to see her therapist and all this. And so seeing this in the media, also having celebrities like Taraji, who she has a foundation that you guys probably already heard about. I think it's called Boris Lawrence Henson Foundation, that she started for, promote mental wellness in the Black community. So I'm actually encouraged by seeing these representations in the media, seeing celebrities come out and talk about, the need to take care of your mental health. And so it's becoming less stigmatized. Right. And I feel like in the future, we're headed in the right direction. And I talked to some of the ladies at NCNW. It was last month that they had their national convention, about, things that we can do to continue to destigmatize mental health, use of mental health services. And I said, just from a personal level, being able to talk to your family members, right, and be transparent with them about, use of mental health services, and saying, hey, if you need me to help you find someone, I can help you. I feel like that has been kind of empowering in my family, where now I have many family members who before they were totally like, well, I'm not crazy, I don't want to go, I don't want this in my record and all this. And now they're going and they're happy and they're promoting it with their friends. So I feel like, on a personal level, that's, something that we can continue to do. And then also being able to collaborate with, community organizations and, outside of like, the big well-known ones, also, smaller organizations and, churches to promote mental wellness, So I'm very encouraged by that. And so, go ahead.
I had a question.
Mm-hmm.
So we're thinking about how this would relate specifically to the Gerttown residents, your app in particular. And so, have you had a chance to think about whether or not there are ways to customize the app for us, or, just thinking about the protocols of rolling it out, or, so have you worked with a intact community like this before? And what are your thoughts about that?
So this would actually be my first time working with a community like this, but I do have a lot of experience in needs assessment and tailoring interventions for communities. My background is in also program evaluation and actually development of interventions. And so as I think about your community, the biggest thing I think when we had this conversation, I wanted to know like I know that you've collected some data on what are the needs in the community. So that's where I would want to start, right? So I have the base features for the app, but it'd be really important to know what are the needs for the community, because then we can build in the content, and the features that you need to better serve those clients that come to the center. So that's where I would start. And if we don't have all the data that we need, as far as knowing exactly, what they would need, that's where I would start and say, like, let's do a brief survey and see what are the things that they need right now. And so from there, we would work together and put in the content, and I would develop the features and everything. Yeah. So I always come from a point of, let me know what what you need, as opposed to here's this app, make it fit for your community, Yeah. Oh, you have to unmute.
I'm always doing that. And so the cure for the common cold is, as I've outlined already. So I think that, definitely I can share with you the results of our needs assessment.
Yeah.
Essentially, it comes down to two populations within the Gerttown community that are the focus. One is single moms, about in
Okay.
30s, and under employed young men between the ages of, I think we said 22 to 26, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I say underemployed because we discovered that many of them have some college. So they started pursuing college and did not complete.
Okay.
We also know that they don't have vehicles. And so they are limited in terms of what kinds of jobs they can have and where they are, because they're either walking, using bicycles, or they're catching public transportation to try to get to their jobs. So they may be missing out on higher paying jobs and so on, if they could get to them. So those are the two. We don't have a neighborhood school anymore because New Orleans is 100% charter school now.
Okay.
So whereas before there were 2 neighborhood schools right in the area, so we could do a lot of work in that sense. Now, you don't know where the kids are, where they're going, or anything. The second thing is that, and we used to have more families who were homeowners, young families who were homeowners. We don't have that anymore.
Okay.
We used to have a lot of elders as anchors who also own their own homes, who lived in the neighborhood. They either died or their adult children took them with them when they evacuated and moved out of New Orleans after Katrina. So we lost a lot of elders, either from them being moved out or they died. And so we lost those old time homeowners who were staples and who grounded the community. So those two bookends of the elderly and young people that tend to be, you know, warm and fuzzies for people, we don't have. What we've got are hardcore middle, you know, folks in the middle who are just working adults, and so on. There are issues of crime, and so on, but they just put a new police station in the neighborhood. They just put Notorium in, brand new, next to the police station. And so both of those things are in there. So one would think we'd have to look at the stats and see if the crime has gone down since the police station has been open. And that's only been in the past 1 or 2 years that it's been open. But yeah, so contrary to I think what people want to think that is in the community, it is primarily these 22 to 26-year-olds male, and it's the 30-something-year-old single moms who are working. And so that's who we're focusing on in our efforts for the next 5 years, taking a look at that. There are two things that we want to do follow up to and understanding. There well, things that we know, like I already mentioned, that we know that many of them don't own vehicles, that they're underemployed. We also know that their average income is lower than their outgo. So we have an idea of what it costs, what a budget would be for someone who lived in that community. And we also have from data that's been collected from data centers about the community that their income is lower than their expected outgo. That's one of the reasons why we keep the utility system going, even though we know that that's short term, not empowerment, but we know that until we do something to change their expenses or increase their income, they're going to be short every single month, robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Yeah.
We have a good idea. We've got stats. We've got tables and charts, and you can take a look at that. We received an updated data set, and Andrea is working with a postdoc fellow who's working with us, and they're analyzing that to come up with new tables for us to see if the new data provides us with new information. Our survey was more qualitative. We had our students walking through the community for 2 years, gathering data. They were observing, they were informally interviewing, and we gathered that and analyzed that on a weekly basis for 2 years, and gathered that to find out what are people saying that their needs are. And they overwhelmingly talked about, of course, finances. They talked about the crime. And they also talked about needing activities and so on. And they talked about what they wanted to see the outreach center do in terms of our programming and so on. So we are in the process of meeting their needs through that. Two things we want to do follow up. One was no one really talked about health. And I can see from the people just anecdotally, when they come in for utilities assistance, they all have health problems. They're all coming in with something. And it's interesting that they didn't mention it or talk about it. We also have a clinic right in the community. And I know they collect data and I've requested it, so I need to follow up and see if there's anything interesting or different that adds to what it is that we need to talk about. There are activities going on through Xavier's College of Pharmacy, and we will be getting data that we can use to provide a more comprehensive picture of what's going on in Gertown. So we'll be getting that is related to COVID. So that's where the money is right now, is looking at COVID. Gertown is considered to be a hotspot. So it's constantly going to get lots of attention in terms of research that's being done. And so I am part of some of those research projects. So we will be getting some of that information that does provide some health stuff that's going to help us. But no, nobody talked about health in the data that we collected. So we're very much interested in following up and getting that. The second thing is we want to do a deeper dive. So we had scheduled, we were trying to schedule the focus group interviews with the young men to find out, why did they not persist? Was it because they didn't have money? Is it because they didn't have transportation? Was it that there were competing demands on their time and they couldn't continue? So we want to know, for those that had started, what prevented them from continuing to get their degrees. So we wanted to do follow-up interviews with them. So that's where we are. And of course, now everything is on pause. But when we start up again, that's where we're going to go. We're going to continue to work on that. So that's where we are. They also talked about mental health. So here we are providing that. So that's good. But yeah, so that's where we are with that. What we'd like, so I'd like to share with you the results of our needs